Okay, good evening, everyone. I would like to call the City Council meeting of June 8th, 2020 to order. Would you please call the roll?
Second.
Here.
Johnson.
Here.
Leo.
Here.
Lewis.
Here.
Peterson.
Here.
Trester.
Here.
Verplank.
Here.
Okay, all are present and accounted for. And next is approval of the minutes of the special City Council meeting of May 28th. Is there a motion to approve?
Mr. Mayor,
Yes.
I move that we approve the minutes of the, hang on just a second,
So May 28th.
May 28th minutes as sent.
Second, this is Garn.
Moved by Peterson, second by Lewis to approve the minutes. Any discussion? Then we'll call the roll.
Peterson.
Yes.
Lewis.
Yes.
Becken.
Yes.
Johnson.
Yes.
Leo.
Yes.
Trester.
Yes.
Verplank.
Yes.
The minutes of May 28th are approved. No mayor's comments, city manager comments.
No comments.
All right, next item, are there any agenda changes to be proposed?
Yeah,
Holly?
I would like to make a motion to amend the agenda to add an item. I have a resolution submitted to fly the pride flag at City Hall.
All right, we can, I'm sorry.
This is second. This is Garn.
Okay. We can approve agenda changes unless anyone on the council has an objection.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
I object. This was not noticed to the public, and there may be people that want to speak to that topic, and we should give them every opportunity to do that. So I'd be really glad to talk about it, but not tonight.
All right. Therefore, we can't add that item to the agenda tonight, Holly. Next are guest speakers. First is Colin Brooks of the Michigan Technological University. Talk to us about Eurasian water milfoil. Colin, are you there? There you are. Unmute yourself, please.
Oh, there you go. I'm connected by phone. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Hi, yeah, so thank you for this opportunity. My name is Colin Brooks. I'm from Michigan Tech University, and I've been studying Eurasian water milfoil these last few years, and I understand you've got some options in front of you for treating an infestation of Eurasian water milfoil. And hey, there you go. There's my background. It says, if you notice, it says PhD candidate. That's because in my 40s, I decided to go back to school and get a PhD in aquatic biology because I needed a new challenge. And I've been focused on identifying and mapping Eurasian water milfoil. And in the work I've done for Michigan DNR and EPA, I've come across or encountered and seen different treatment methods. And I understand that you're looking at some different treatment methods for an area, one of the areas downriver, and just wanted to perhaps talk about what some of the options are and see what questions you had about some of the different treatment and identification options that are out there. And it looks like you've got one of our full-length reports there. So if you're ever having trouble falling asleep, that's a good report to read. And one of the things we talk about in that report is that there are multiple options out there. Chemical treatment with herbicide is probably one of the most widely used methods. It's what's usually used for larger areas. I understand you're looking at treating about an 11-acre area. It's usually the cheapest method, but in our work, where we worked with in the Lational Islands near Hessel and Cedarville, there we were working with a community that had over 100 different water intakes directly into Lake Huron, and they did not, when we put a grant in with them to both Michigan DNR and then a later grant into US EPA, they did not want any herbicide being used in the coastal waters around the Lake Chanel Islands. So we looked at other options. They had previously done a study on weevils that preferentially like to consume Eurasian water milfoil. We also looked at diver-assisted suction harvesting. Actually, that we did up in the QNR waterway in Pike Bay, closer to our university. And then we've also seen mechanical harvesting take place, and then also treatment with a native fungus that goes by the name NT. So we've seen those 4 different treatment methods, and what we found was, although it's primarily been used for relatively small areas, like an acre or so, diver-assisted suction harvesting, or DASH, which is reviewed in our report, seems to be effective if people are looking for non-chemical control, at least of small areas. Whereas we saw with chemical control, sometimes if the herbicide hadn't mixed well into the water column, we saw milfoil come back in the same year sometimes that the herbicide was applied. So, but other people have used it to control entire lakes. So those are some of the background that I'm coming from. I don't work for any aquatic management companies, so I'm happy to answer any other questions or any questions you might have.
All right, council, any questions?
Mr. Mayor,
Yes.
this is Chris. Thank you very much. This was your pretty exciting reading for the first 2 pages, and then I didn't understand any of it. But I was interested in the MT. That seemed to have a pretty good ratio of stopping it. I believe 70% stopped. Is that a?
Yeah, there was a 70% reduction in biomass. Is what we saw the application of the MT fungus.
Is that an expensive process? I mean, I saw you grow it somewhere.
Yeah, so we had to pay Wisconsin Biosciences, or WisBio for short, to grow it for us, because originally the USDA, who had funded most of the MT fungus research in the 90s and early 2000s, was actually going to grow it for us for free, but they got out of the MT fungus growing business, even though their papers seemed to indicate that it had promise. And so we had to pay Wisconsin Bioscience to start it up from scratch, which was expensive. Now, what I don't know, because our project ended in 2018, is if they've continued to provide this as a service elsewhere. But there's a fairly lengthy literature that this native fungus does preferentially impact Eurasian water milfoil, and seem to have a fair amount of efficacy in knocking it back at similar levels to what you get with herbicide. Now, the long-term benefit I don't think has been studied as well as it should have, but with herbicide, you also have to come back every so often because it's hard to get everything. So once you take on invasive species management, it keeps going. It essentially has to happen periodically.
Is it a spray or a pellet or what?
It's a spray. The MT fungus is mixed into essentially a large tank, and then it's sprayed directly onto the water where the milfoil grows. And I said it was relatively easy to get the EPA permission because it's a native fungus.
Thank you.
Barry.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I read the report. I'm sure I missed most of it, but it sounded like most of the tests were done on lakes versus moving river chains. Is that correct?
Yeah, a lot of the work. So, for example, we did our work in a variety of areas. The main 2 areas that we actually worked with for the herbicide and the diver-assisted suction harvesting DASH, we actually worked in Pike Bay, which is a small bay off of the main QNR waterway. And then for the MT fungus application, we actually worked in the coastal waters of Lake Huron around the Relational Islands. So it's not a typical small lake, but it's not a river either.
Mr. Mayor, this is Garn.
Okay, Garn, go ahead, Helen.
So I have just a quick question. Are you aware of, so I've got two questions actually. Are you aware of any type of environmental grants that might be available to study a river body like this using the MT method? That's my first question.
Yeah, so our Michigan DNR grant, which is the one actually where we were looking at herbicide and dash treatments, they have funded through the Michigan Invasive Species Grant Program research and application into different treatment methods. And that's Michigan funded by Michigan taxpayers. And we've had a decent amount of success partnering with interested communities that want to test out different methods. And then the MT fungus application was actually under a US EPA grant under the Great Lakes Restoration Initiative, TLRI, where they were willing to fund the testing of this in the coastal waters of the Great Lakes. Because it hadn't been tested in this many places at once. And so the GLRI process has worked for us as well. Now the GLRI subjects differ from one year to the next, whereas the Michigan Invasive Species Grant Program, MISGP, has had a somewhat more stability in terms of its subject matter. So that may be one to look at harder.
Okay, and then my second question was, given that you have students in the doctoral program, might you possibly have some students that are looking for a research topic for their dissertation? And this might fall in that category.
That does happen. I'm a somewhat atypical graduate student in that I'm older than my advisor. But yes, the two professors I've worked with on campus, and in fact worked on with this research, were Drs. Amy Marcarelli and Dr. Casey Huckins, and they have indeed had graduate students, both master's and PhD students, have looked for research. One of them, for example, studied whether or not lakes that had had more herbicide treatment had reduced diversity of aquatic vegetation species. So that's something that he did under his study. Another one looked to see if there were differences in overall plant productivity between treated areas and milfoil treated areas and non-treated areas. So we have indeed done exactly that.
Thank you.
Holly?
Oh, go ahead, sorry.
Sorry, I had a question. Is this an issue? I know I've been up in Le Chenot Islands. I know it's very cold there. So there's obviously a temperature difference. Yep. I'm just wondering if we've talked to Grand Haven, South Haven, Spring Lake, the communities around us, Holland.
Yep.
Maybe that's a question for Kirk. I mean, I would assume that this is an issue not just for us.
Jane?
Are we going to discuss this later on, or are we going into a discussion about all of this right now? Because I see Ben Hurspink's on from the ODC, and it's probably pretty important that we coordinate upriver with what's going on there with what we do down here. So are we going to discuss this under communications, or is this the discussion?
Kirk, maybe I should have started with you to set the stage for this. You have a comment?
Well, I asked Mr. Brooks to be on here, and I thought this would get the discussion going. You can discuss it under the guest speaker topic. Since Mr. Brooks is on the line, I don't know if he wants to set through the whole meeting, so this would probably be the best time to have some discussions about it, and we're in the heat of it, so I'd say discuss away if you're asking my opinion.
Okay, well, that's what I kind of thought, but none of it is on is in a section on the agenda that we can act on anything. So I just want to have this be kind of a cohesive discussion. Anyway, Jane?
Okay, well then I'd like to hear from Ben about what the ODC and the Potawatomi Marsh is doing upriver from us, and possibly he could also comment about what's going on in Holland.
Ben, would you care to comment?
Yeah, can you guys hear me all right?
Yeah.
Yes.
All right. So we've done some milfoil treatments for the Potawatomi Hunt Club in the past 2 years with moderate success doing strictly herbicide. We dabbled into the weevil thing, but got turned off a little bit by the cost of it all. So I haven't explored the MT fungus at all, but yeah, so we've just focused on the herbicide and had moderate success. You only get pretty much one season of eradication. That's probably the wrong word, but that's pretty much the extent of our success we've had in the Potawatomi. As far as Holland, I haven't seen it be as big of an issue up in Holland, as bad as it is in the Kalamazoo there. So.
Okay.
Mr. Mayor,
Chris.
I have a follow-up question for Mr. Brooks, soon to be Dr. Brooks. What happens if we don't treat it? Will it continue to grow in size, or does it all depend on water or what?
There can certainly be variations from one year to the next. We found for a while as the lake levels rose, we were seeing less milfoil in some areas on the Relational Islands, possibly because it had actually gotten too deep in some of the areas it had grown well. So you will see variation independent from one year to the next, independent of treatment sometimes. But essentially, milfoil is good at colonizing. What areas it can. And that's typically water up to about 12 feet deep or so. Sand, it grows and it likes kind of sandier, more disturbed areas. We often saw it growing, for example, on the Lake Chanaux, where people had dredged to approach their boat docks. Was one area, so it tended to grow a lot. So there, and then it spreads primarily via fragments. So one of the biggest problems that we've seen is with mechanical harvesting, which is done for temporary relief of a few weeks, is that creates lots of little different fragments that essentially helps seed it out to other areas. So, and of course, if you're trying to keep your public boat dock free, and which is I guess was an issue up in the Lake Chanaux, then that does provide immediate relief. But it's probably not making the situation better both in the surrounding areas and the medium term.
I have one more question. Have the places that have used either a pesticide or herbicide, has there been any bad reactions that have come with fish or wildlife?
So that's not my area of expertise. I can tell you how it grows and what it looks like, and drone imagery, that's another area that I've been working on. I do know that some people are reluctant to have herbicide and can get concerned about it, but the herbicide is legal to apply in the state of Michigan with the appropriate permit, and it is the main management method that people use because it's the cheapest for large areas. I'm quite happy to be open about that. What I'm trying to do in my research is point out that there are alternatives out there that people may want to look at. I mean, last night I was, in fact, for my dissertation, I was trying to find references about these different treatment methods, and there is literature out there about different costs and different effective treatment areas. What I would encourage is if you're talking to these aquatic management companies, then I would at least ask them about these other treatment methods. Like, again, one of the ones that we found seemed to be particularly effective over small patches was the DASH, the diver-assisted suction harvesting, and wasn't as expensive as growing your own supply of MT fungus. that may be one you want to ask the companies about, whether they're willing to do that and what the costs associated with it are.
Mr.
Holly.
I had a question, Mr. Brooks, about one-time treatment. Is it possible to deal with this effectively with a one-time treatment, or does it require an ongoing approach?
It really is. It's hard to get everything. What we found in our work with herbicide-based treatments in the Keweenaw waterway was there was always some patch that got missed, and even when you got everything, it could come back. Like Ben was saying, you may only be getting essentially 1 year or 1 season of control. One of the things we liked about Dash, despite the greater cost, was you are literally sending somebody down there to hand pull the plants and then suck them into an underwater vacuum that then get bagged. So at least you know you're removing the plant. But whether or not that's the best option for an 11-acre area is really going to depend on what costs Saugatuck is willing to set aside for this, and whether or not that's practical for this riverine environment. It's like empty fungus, like weevils. It's another tool in the arsenal to consider, is the way I like to put it.
So is it
Another tool in the toolbox.
I have a question for Kirk. Kirk, are you aware of anything that Douglas is doing in their weed patch on the other side of the bridge?
I believe they're doing some type of application with the pesticide, but I'm not sure where. They were doing like a test area, I believe.
Okay. Holly, excuse me, Holly?
Oh, yes. I was just trying to figure out if, just following up, so in 1 season, 1 application would be enough, or 1 treatment would be enough, or is it something that has to be done monthly, or is it something that has to be done, how often does it need to be addressed?
So in our work, when we were paying a company to work with us to do the research and apply and test both herbicide and Dash, we had only intended them to go out once in the season. Ben, when you did your application, was that a one-time for that year?
Yeah, that was just a 1 application.
Yeah. So I think that's what's most common. So one of my primary jobs on the project was to use drone imagery, and I know I'm not the only person that does this for aquatic weeds, but one of my was to use drone imagery to map how much the extent of milfoil had changed. And I remember, I said in Pike Bay, right there by Chassel, being surprised at coming back 2 months later in August, and enough of the milfoil had been missed by herbicide treatment that I saw much more in the areas that I was mapping with my drone than I had expected. And I suspect that they just missed some areas. I'm not exactly sure what happened there, but I could certainly see plenty with my drone.
Okay. Ken?
Yes, Mark.
Hi. My question, sir, is if a herbicide application is used, there obviously is some type of a die-off of,
Yes.
I don't know if it's the whole plant, the top of the plant, the stalk, but once that die-off occurs, what happens to what's left over? Can it be swept away with currents? Could we be just transferring the problem from one area to another area, downriver or to the east along the shoreline and people's docks, etc.? So can you speak to that, please?
Yeah, well, if you were doing mechanical harvesting, I would certainly say that you may be spreading the problem to nearby docks or downriver. With herbicide, the intention is to actually kill the plant down to the roots and kill it off. So if the application is successful, then you shouldn't be transferring the problem downriver. But again, I think it sounds like it was Ben's experience as well. It can work, and the other things I've seen in some of the literature and some of these, and in case many of these watershed councils or harbor groups will post their reports online too, is people will use a combination of methods as well. It's rarely, unfortunately, only one method that works exclusively.
Any other questions here? So, Barry, go ahead.
Yeah, sorry. Is there any other collateral damage with the herbicide or in fish or wildlife?
And that's not I don't want to as a good PhD student, I don't want to claim areas beyond my knowledge. I do know that the state of Michigan considers it a legal treatment for milfoil, but that's not an area I've studied.
Jane.
Maybe Ben could answer that question or weigh in on it.
So I'm not going to speak to the wildlife as much because I mean all literature would point to that's an okay treatment, like Colin said. But what you're doing essentially when you're doing an herbicide application is you're doing a 2,4-D is the herbicide generally used called Navigate, which is a broadly specific herbicide. So it's fairly species selective in which one it goes for, and that it's only going to hit broadleaf plants. So yeah, there will be collateral damage as far as other broadleaf native plants in the water column. So.
And I believe my experience, Ben, is that when people choose herbicide, it tends to be for the dense stands that are almost entirely Eurasian water milfoil, because they've gotten that dense infestation there.
Correct.
So when we've discussed this in the past, Clerk has always raised the challenge of how do you get permission of the riparian owners around the lake. Has this been an issue in your experience, either Colin or Ben?
Well, I'll just speak quickly. So in the case of our work in the Keweenaw Waterway, the local communities actually did a special assessment to pay for the herbicide control. So they wanted that because it was impacting their recreational opportunities. In the case of the Relational Islands, however, they wanted nothing to do with herbicides in the nearshore areas around there. So that's why they looked into alternative methods like weevils and the MT fungus.
I think
On a wide area like where you guys are proposing that 11-acre area, you'd have a lot of riparian owners that would all need to be on board unless something special like Colin was talking about was put in place.
Right. Kirk, didn't we do an analysis of that and identify how many owners there would be?
Yeah, we did. We came up with a potential list of all the property owners we would need to get permission slips from if you were going to go the individual route without a special assessment. I talked to the people at the state of Michigan. It seems like they've had the best luck with, in large areas and lakes and things of that nature to do a special assessment. Number one, it prevents one person from stopping the process. But number two, you also got to look at this as having some type of long-term funding source, because this won't be a one-year thing. You're going to have to do something probably many years down the road. And if you don't have a long-term funding source allocated towards it, you're probably going to potentially run into some problems. So that's why everyone that I talked to has suggested that the special assessment route is the best way to go to eliminate one property owner from stopping the process. But number two, giving you a good funding tool to actually get the work done. And the reality is we have a small area here identified, but it's probably has spread to some other areas. So it's probably larger than this area. And also the area up past the Blue Star Bridge in Douglas is, if you just eradicate it and treat it down here and it's not treated beyond the bridge, you're probably just going to get reinfestations pretty quick. So you probably got to look at it a little bit larger area if you really want to get some long-term success from what I've been told.
You've probably got this upriver in this situation.
Mhm.
So, Mr. Mayor, this is Garnet again. Mr. Brooks, I got one more quick question for you. So what happens if left untreated? If that, in that 11.5 acre space, if we do nothing, what happens?
So let's say that this is a bit hard to say with the past few. Let's say we don't, the weather conditions and the lake levels don't change too much, which is, again, not been our experience the last few years, right? Milfoil will expand to the areas available to it, because one of the reasons it's invasive is it can outcompete other species, native plants. And there's a fair amount of research that, again, most of this work is done in lakes. Once milfoil invades, it lowers the diversity of native plants because it crowds them out. So if you've got some milfoil and it's left untreated, it will usually expand to other areas.
All right, thank you.
Ken?
Mark,
Yeah, for the benefit of our speaker, the areas there, as little as what, Ken, 6 years ago, was an island.
right.
8 years ago. So my question is could this be kind of opposite of what you said, an advent of it is, of higher water? Because I've lived here most of my life and boated around here all my life, and I can't remember as much of this particular type of species, invasive species. Oftentimes what you see there are just lily pads when the water is low, until it gets so low it's a beach and muck area.
Right.
Yeah, so you may indeed be experiencing something a little bit different than what we saw in the Lake Chanel Islands. There, it had already become established about 10 years ago, and when the water levels rose, some of those areas, the milfoil concentration was reduced because it became too deep. Here, it sounds like you've got an area that was essentially above the water during our recent low water, only 6 years ago now. And then now is somewhat beneath the water surface. So you've got that kind of shallow, warm, sunny environment that aquatic plants love. And it's become colonized by milfoil, which likes this kind of environment. So yes, you could be seeing the opposite there, where you've actually, because of the higher lake levels, water levels, it's essentially become new habitat that wasn't available before.
Anyone else? So where do we go from here? We've had plenty of studies. We did some cost analysis last year. Shall we pursue again one of these courses of action? I don't know. The best question I had was answered. I don't know where the milfoil is going to go eventually, but it's already very close to the water, to the top of the water, in a lot more areas than we see visually out today. We know that from boating around that over the weekend, there were probably 4 or 5 pontoon boats that got stuck in areas that were not obviously weed. Colin, you were going to?
No, I was just nodding my head in agreement. Again, I've literally been writing sections about the negative effects of milfoil growth. This is a sentence I was working on this past weekend. Negative effects of dense EWM growth, that's short for milfoil, have been described as restricting recreation such as boating, swimming, and sport fishing, reducing lakeside property values, clogging water intakes, lowering dissolved oxygen concentrations, and reducing the numbers of native plant species. So there's my summary.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes, Chris.
This is Chris. I think maybe the first question that we would need to ask ourselves is the willingness to go forward to try to treat this some way. I think that's probably the first hurdle to get over with is the city willing to, either whether it's assessment or going door to door, are we feeling that this is enough of a threat that we need to address it? I believe we do. I'm not sure how. I mean, that for me, that's the second stage, but for now, I think we need to address it.
I agree. How about the rest of council? Barry? Barry, unmute.
Sorry.
There you go.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more with Chris, and the mayor chipped in on that one. It is a problem. It's not going away. You know, on our little budget, how do we pay for it? And that's our next challenge, is to find out how to pay for it. But I think Chris hit it on the head.
Yes.
And
Mark?
I can speak to that from what information we've gotten from our two speakers. It looks like it'll never be eradicated. I may be willing to support a one-year project contingent on future projects being funded by a special assessment district. So the city isn't on the hook every single year, but maybe we can be the lead agency for the first attempt at it. And maybe that's a discussion that others may could support. Ben spoke highly of Navigate. I saw that was on one of the lists. That one of, I think both vendors that we talked to listed as potential treatments. So let's say I'm in the definite maybe category.
I hear you.
And I'm going to send Kirk a link to the Michigan Invasive Species Grant Program in case that's something that you want to explore as a way of getting funding to do an initial deployment.
Well, that would be great. And I think Mark's comment might be a way to go. I mean, we can do it 1 year, find out if it's effective or not, and if it is, there'll be a lot more interest in a taxation district to fund it in the future. So that's a good thought. Anyone else? Barry?
Yes, sounds like a great idea. We really should talk to our neighbors, get a handle of what Douglas is doing. I think that we have a will to move forward on this one way or the other. So we're on the move, but getting the Douglas and the Saugatuck Township, you know, in the knowledge of what we're moving ahead with, could benefit us all. So
Sure.
just part of the process.
Agreed. Anyone else want to weigh in here? All right. Well, I definitely want to. I think there's enough interest here, and a majority of the council members have expressed enough interest in moving forward with this and finding ways and means to do it. So I think what we need to do probably is talk about this at the next workshop. Time is passing by, and I recognize that we may not be able to get to this even this summer if we keep tossing this meeting, but I don't see any alternative. Jane?
Well, I think that's a good idea. I think we should get Douglas involved in our next workshop, or at least get some kind of an answer from them, because they do have areas along Tower Marine that are in Douglas. So this really has to be a coordinated effort. And if we even treat and get rid of it, boats from Douglas can drag it on into Saugatuck again as we treat. So I think we really need to at least talk to Douglas about this and see what they have to say.
Agree. Any
Mayor?
other comments on this?
Mr. Mayor,
Chris?
this is Chris. Going back to Mr. Brooks, is there a specific time where it's too late in a season to try it, or it's ineffectual?
Yeah, I mean, when we were, so both when we were doing the dash treatment and the MT fungus treatment, both of those happened in mid to late July, at least with our project experience.
What about with the
And then the herbicide, that was the one where we had deployed it in June, and then I came back with my drones 2 months later, and was surprised to see some fairly vigorous growth in those 2 months.
So we're not too late.
Yeah, sorry.
We're not too late yet if we came to some agreement to move forward to do something yet this season.
Yeah, you're still within the treatment season. Ben, I'm not sure when your treatment experience has been. It does start dying back as the water gets colder, although it can't overwinter, which is why it gets going so well in the spring. In the colder waters of the Lational Islands, it starts dying back in roughly mid-September or so, and then you've missed that year's chance.
Thank you.
Is the
Mr. Mayor, oh, sorry.
Well, one question, is the permitting process difficult? You said that the state is pretty much comfortable with the herbicide treatment.
So our experience there, so with the herbicide treatment, is we worked with the aquatic management company, and they took care of that permitting for us, and it's something that's part of their business model, or at least for the company we worked with, it was. So it wasn't a big obstacle in that case. The MT fungus was an experimental use permit from the EPA, and but we were able to get that as well.
All right, any other comments on this?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, this is Garn. So there's a couple things that have been suggested that I support. The first is Mark Beckon's suggestion about we do it for 1 year and then follow up with years 2 and 3, possibly with a special assessment. The second was Barry's request that we check with Douglas to see what they're doing. And the third is to pursue any grant opportunities that are out there. I can support all those.
I think that's a good summary. Anyone else?
I agree.
Chris,
I agree.
okay. All right, we have an agenda for that. Then let's move on. Thank you, Colin, and thank you, Ben. I appreciate your input here. It's very helpful.
Thank you for the chance to talk about this.
Our next speaker is Lieutenant Brett Ensfield, Sheriff report. Brett?
Hi, can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Okay, yep. Just got a couple of things. We've switched over to our summer schedule today, so there'll be some overlap with the officers on the weekends and stuff a little bit more. We've had several speed complaints on some of the different roads. I don't know if it's reached your guys' levels or not, but we're addressing those, and also working with the city to get the speed signs up sometime this week in those areas, so we can monitor the data and have a little bit better enforcement times and models and so forth, so we can make our enforcement time a little bit more manageable and so forth. So, and also the last thing is Deputy Visser is back. She's on quarantine right now. She will be returning back to work on the 19th, which is a Friday. So glad to have her back, and she'll be back in the stride here just in a little bit. So that's all I have. So.
Okay, glad to have her back. Any questions of council?
Mayor?
Please, yes, Chris.
Brett, I'd like to thank you for the visibility that's downtown. I've had numerous people talk about it, how great it is to see your presence as you walk around, and thank you for doing that.
Yep, no problem.
Okay, then let's move to public comment on agenda items only. If anyone in the audience wishes to make a comment, please unmute yourself and ask to be recognized. Comments would be limited to 3 minutes.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes. Who do we have?
this is Dan Sheridan.
Oh, Dan. Okay. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you to the whole council and all involved for your time today. I just wanted to make note of an email I sent to Clerk With respect to the zoning items that are on your agenda today, I think the Planning Commission's right on target with respect to their recommendations for office space, second or third floor in the city center. You know, I agree with the sentiment that that's really important for our retail area. But I would support an amendment to allow ground floor office in Water Street East. I'm an engineer and in search of an office. And a river view would be wonderful. So thank you for considering my amendment.
Okay, thank you, Dan. Anyone else?
Yes. Tad DeGraff here. I'd like to speak as well.
Okay, Ted.
Yeah, thank you for your service in this new norm, City Council. Hope you're all well and safe, and I'm glad we're finally discussing this. I have a history of being in this town since I was knee-high and being on a boat, and now after owning a property after graduating from Hope College in 1992, I own a unit where the Armstrong DeGraff Gallery has been since 92, so 28 years. And I've been in real estate in the town for 28 years as well. I've sold multiple commercial structures in town as well as residential. I love the fact that I still own a commercial building down in that district. I'm in the Water Street East District, right across from Wicks Park. It's Park Place Condominium Association, so there are 4 commercial units on the main floor, and there are 2 residential units above. So it's a mixed use building, obviously. I can see there's some vacancies with retail units, which retailers are struggling to make ends meet, so to speak. I've been up and down the lake shore. I know Lake Michigan like the palm of my hand, back of my hand. If you put the thumb up, you get it. I've seen every community from St. Joseph, South Haven, Holland, Grand Haven, Muskegon, Ludington, Manistee, Pentwater, Frankfort, Empire, Glen Arbor, Leland, Traverse City, Petoskey, Harbor Springs. I've been to every community many a time, and I see on their street fronts that they have actual professional building and office spaces available for different types of professionals such as engineers, realtors. They also have professional spaces for attorneys, as well as accountants and so forth. I think that Saugatuck would definitely benefit, and there aren't going to be a lot of them. There's going to be few because the town is so small, but I think it would be very good to have the ability to maybe take some of these retail spaces that aren't surviving and have a professional office come in. I've had interest in an accountant, an engineer, a real estate office, which I might want to do with my property because it's mixed use. I'll still keep a gallery, but hey, I'd like to have a little real estate office there. I think the precedent is set on the corner of Willow Park. Mill Pond Realty has got a mixed use space there with Laura Durham in her office, and then a residence above.
Mr. DeGraff, I hate to interrupt, but your 3 minutes is it's kind of expired. If you wanted to just quickly sum up, we'd appreciate it.
That's fine. I will do that. I just believe that it would behoove the community to maybe open up some of the zoning in the areas for professional office buildings. Thank you for your
Yeah,
time.
thank you very much. Any other comments? David Langley. David, you're muted yet. There you go.
Got it? Okay. Yeah, just a quick question about the chemical treatment for the for this milfoil. What was the average cost that we're looking at for single treatment? I think it said it was attached for it, but I don't have it in front of me. Just your general idea, how much would that cost for treatments?
Kirk, do you have a quick answer? I don't recall.
It's in the under the communications. It's in there. I can't get to it on my computer right now because I got the timer up. But
Okay, well maybe we can get to it later, David, if you hang around.
Okay.
Talk
Yeah.
about it.
Okay. Thanks. That's all I want to know.
Okay, Barry.
Thanks.
I was just going to interject real quick. I did a quick head count on the one proposal in there from the one guys, and it was about $35,000, which would include permits and stuff. So there's a rough figure for you.
Okay. Any other in the audience wishing to make a comment? Agenda items. Dan.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This follows up in sort of a different way on Lieutenant Ensfield, who's on the agenda. If you'll permit me a short personal story. A very good friend of mine served as a helicopter gunship crew chief during the Vietnam War. He remembers vividly and retells the story of returning home to the States wearing his dress uniform. Protesters taunted him. He and others were called baby killers behind their back, sometimes to their faces. It was an ugly time in this country. To say the least, Army morale took a real hit. A few soldiers in that war did indeed dishonor their uniform, but the vast majority simply did their job and served their country. They deserve to be commended, not dishonored. In some ways, we're living through a deja vu kind of moment right now.
Excuse me, this is Garn. Is this on the agenda? What topic on the agenda is this addressing, sir? Please. Dan.
I was approved to speak.
This is public comments for anything on the agenda.
Yes, and Lieutenant Ensfield spoke, and this relates to the policing of the communities.
Then please get there.
I have 3 minutes to get there, and I'm not going to include the interruption on the timing, so you can adjust the timing accordingly.
Well, let's not have debate between folks here. Dan, do you have the floor?
Thank you. Again, Mr. Mayor. Police officers and departments across the country are now being subjected to verbal abuse, vicious stereotyping, and worst of all, violent assault. Officers have been murdered. Legitimate anger arising from a highly publicized case of likely criminal abuse of police power has morphed into a generalized and ugly disdain for all of law enforcement. Almost unbelievably, defund the police has lately become a popular slogan in some quarters. I ask you to imagine the effects of all this on the vast majority of good law enforcement officers. Imagine what it's like to literally risk your life at every traffic stop, at every domestic disturbance call during your shift, only to return home to your family in the evening and see your profession lambasted on social media and television. Imagine what this relentless, often nasty criticism does to your spirit of service and to your morale. So what can we do about all this morale problem? Here's a suggestion, Garnett and others. The City Council should consider issuing a proclamation of support for our police officers here in Saugatuck. We all know these honorable men and women personally, and we know their commitment to our city. They're the ones we count on to come when we are in need and we call. Our Allegan County Sheriff's deputies have our backs. We need to have theirs as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Dan. Anyone else wish to make a comment? I hear none, so we're going to move to approval of accounts payable. Is there a motion?
Sure, this is Garn. I'll jump in. This move to approve the accounts payable in the amount of $25,360.88.
Thank you. It was almost a tie. Barry, are you going to make a second?
I'd be pleased to make a second to that.
All right. Motion by Lewis, second by Johnson to approve. Any discussion? Hearing none, please take the roll.
Lewis,
Yes.
Johnson,
Yes.
Becken,
Yes.
Leo,
Yes.
Peterson,
Yes.
Trester,
Yes.
Verplank.
Yes.
The accounts payable are approved. Next item is the introduction of ordinances, and it's ordinance amendment 154.041, chapter 154, title 15 of the Code of the City of Saugatuck, entitled Land Usage, Zoning Code Section, all those numbers that I'm not going to read because they're on the agenda. Kirk or Cindy, who's going to take the lead on this?
This is Ms. Osmond's department, so I'll let her give council an introduction.
Very well. Cindy.
Thank you. This was a discussion that was actually started back in October or November when we had a request for an office downtown. And I did look at the history of it. And the way our definitions read under professional offices and personal services, I really can't prohibit offices that provide personal service under our current zoning ordinance and definitions. So I went back and, well, we got canceled a couple times and then we had COVID. And so I took it back to Planning Commission and they felt rather strongly that they did not want to have offices in the downtown areas except on the second and third floor. Now, if you look at the zoning map here that's up on your screen, Water Street East is the green part of the green color zoning. That is the part that Dan Sheridan and the other person, I don't see his name anymore, talked about allowing for offices on the first floor. If you're going to allow offices on the first floor, and remember, this recommendation comes from Planning Commission, and it's a recommendation to adopt an ordinance, not something that they're telling you you have to do and that you can't amend it, but you can amend it and change that to allow offices on the first floor if you find that that's appropriate. This is a less intense use area of the zoning ordinance. It has, one of its statements is to preserve the residential character. So it's, an office is a less intense use than a retail or a food service. So the ordinance is to not allow them anywhere in any commercial zone district except on the second and third floor. And that is the recommendation from the Planning Commission. I don't know if Chris, if you want to chime in as being the Planning Commission or the council representative on the Planning Commission.
Thank you, Cindy. I think she explained it very well, but we were unanimous in not believing that there should be that type of approval in these the prime commercial downtown areas. And while I can appreciate the fact that it is hard sometimes to keep the places rented, that green swatch is huge. And that would open it up, I believe, too much. And I think we wanted to preserve the downtown district for the ones that we have now, restaurants and et cetera.
Very well. Is there a motion? Is there a motion to move forward with introducing this ordinance? Chris?
Mayor, I move that we place the proposed ordinance amendment to amend sections 154.041, chapter 154, title 15 of the Code of the City of Saugatuck entitled Land Usage, Zoning Code sections 154.005, 154.024, 154.039, 154.040, 154.041 on the June 22nd, 2020 regular council meeting agenda for action.
Is there a second? Barry, did you? What?
I didn't raise my hand.
Okay, all right. Your yellow thing flashed. Is there a second to this motion?
So as I understand it, this is to place it on the agenda meeting for discussion or for public hearing?
Action.
Right?
Public hearing was held at the planning commission level.
Got it. Okay.
It would be for us to pass or not.
Or amend.
Or amend, yes.
So I'll second that. This is Garn.
Okay, Garn, thank you.
Mhm.
Discussion. Barry?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. The amendment, again, is a tool often used to make a good motion better or to make a bad motion palatable. And so I'm willing to move forward with this to get it on the agenda. And somebody may choose to amend it, and that'll be voted on. And if that amendment is passed, it'll become part of the motion.
Well, anyone else?
And
Yes, Mark.
I couldn't support this as presented. I think that based on concern about future vacancies, the future of retail, that we have to be a little more fluid regarding use of some of these properties. Maybe city center can stay without first floor offices. But I think in some of these other areas, we've got to be a little bit more flexible. Possibly consider just allowing it by special land use, which gives some additional, I think, powers or prerogatives to the planning commission. For instance, a building that might have been vacant for an extended period of time, a building that can provide off-street parking, which we have very little of. I just, that's my position, and I'd like to have that conversation. Interestingly enough, the way this ordinance reads, the property next to Chemical Bank couldn't be used for some type of professional office, even though that's got plenty of space for that. It's had several office operations over the years, and they have plenty of off-street parking, so it could be a value to our downtown area. So anyways, I'd like to just have that discussion, and that's where I'm coming from. Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Mark. Anyone else?
Yeah, I'd like to speak, Mayor.
Sure.
I'm going to agree with Mark. I just think that we're headed, we have empty storefronts and we're headed into sort of a great unknown. And I think I agree with what Mark said. I think I would like to see some flexibility allowed for folks who might have some interesting uses coming in. And I think we just need to be flexible to that. So I don't know if this is a great time to close this idea off right now.
Anyone else wish to comment? Jane?
Well, I personally wouldn't want to see offices on Butler Street, but I think these Water Street locations that we're talking about are real mixed use, and maybe a engineer's office or whatever would be kind of a plus to the town, would show a little more activity. I wouldn't be against Water Street being used for offices. I think that may be a good idea.
Okay. Barry,
I'll speak if everybody, after everybody else has had their say.
I think everybody has weighed in but me. And I do support moving this forward for discussion and to open it up. Obviously, it would be open for amendments if necessary, but I think that, as Jane said, given that area of town, I think adding some diversity of having office space in there would be could be a positive thing. So I would vote to move it forward. Barry?
Okay, so I see two choices that one expedites, the other doesn't. We can either defeat this motion to put it on the agenda for discussion and possible amendment, or we can pass this motion, get it on the agenda and amend it at that meeting and fix it. And I think that's the fastest way to do it.
Okay. If there are no other, Chris?
I think I agree with Barry on those are the two options. And I'd like to see it move forward with us doing the amendments at the second phase, if that's all right. Again, this is just a recommendation from the Planning Commission. And so we have the two-step process now to show the ordinances. I'd like to see it move forward with the amendment at the second stage, if possible.
Right. You weren't, Barry, you weren't suggesting amending it at this stage, right?
I was suggesting that we amend it on June 22nd.
There you go.
Yep.
Yeah.
Thanks.
All right, then let me call the question. Kirk, would you take the roll on this motion?
Peterson,
Yes.
Lewis,
Yes.
Becken,
Yes.
Johnson,
Yes.
Leo,
Yes.
Trester,
Yes.
Verplank.
Yes.
So the, excuse me, the ordinance amendment is approved, and we'll move on to the next council meeting on June 22nd. There are no public hearings, no unfinished business. Under new business, the city manager interim city clerk appointment. Kirk, would you lead off here?
Yeah, the city clerk position is currently vacant, and I'm conducting a search to fill the position. Section 6.3 of the Saugatuck City Charter states the city manager shall make all appointments and removals for those appointed, referring to the staff, except he shall receive the approval of the majority of council for the appointment of the clerk, treasurer, and the assessor. I am appointing the City of Saugatuck Planning and Zoning Administrator, Ms. Cindy Osmond, to serve as interim city clerk until the position is filled. The appointment, however, is required to receive approval from a majority of council. Ms. Osmond has served as an election precinct chairperson for the City of Holland and worked many elections there, so she already has a base, a general fundamental knowledge that will be helpful in this temporary transition. Also, the last 2 weeks, Ms. Osmond has worked with our previous city clerk, Ms. Nagel, to get up to speed. So really the main objective here is really primarily focused on the election work. All the other duties are kind of being dispersed throughout the minimal staff we have here, but this is my recommendation, and council would need to approve that.
Jane?
Mr. Mayor.
Jane first, then Garnet.
I'd like to make a motion to approve the city manager's appointment of Cindy Osmond to serve as interim city clerk.
Second, Ms. Garnet.
Good. Moved by Verplank, second by Garn. Discussion.
Mr. Mayor?
And Barry.
Yeah, I'm glad we're doing this because, you know, Cindy just sits around, doesn't have anything to do. So keep her plate full.
Yeah.
We are blessed to have her.
Indeed. Barry?
Again, Cindy, thank you. Kirk, thank you. Now we're moving into busy times and we're short a person, and you guys just keep stepping up. And it gives me goosebumps. Thank you.
Indeed. We have a great staff. You sure you want to do this, Cindy?
I can do it, as long as it's not for more than 3 or 4 months.
All right. Any other discussion?
Just really quickly, Mr. Mayor, Kirk, I've got a couple typos I found. I'll scan this in and send it back to you so you can fix them. You probably want it to read correctly. The
Oh,
academic in me, I can't help myself.
yeah, thank you.
Mhm.
All right, then would you call the roll, please?
For Plank,
Yes.
Lewis,
Yes.
Becken,
Thanks, Cindy. Yes.
Johnson,
Yes.
Leo,
Yes, yes, yes.
3
You only
yeses.
vote once.
We only get one vote.
Peterson,
Get her to sign fast, yes.
Trester,
Yes,
motion passes.
congratulations, Cindy.
Thank you. Look forward to it.
We will too. There's no consent agenda. So next are public comments on any subject. If you wish to make a comment, please identify or please unmute yourself and ask for the floor. Again, comments should be limited to 3 minutes.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes.
I'm not going to make another comment. I'm just going to leave the meeting and thank everyone for their time.
Well, thank you. Any others? Okay, then back to the Kalamazoo Harbor invasive species under communications. Do we have any more to add to that? I thought not. And then B is the attorney communication regarding the dune grass request.
Yes, unfortunately, I did not receive that revised memo from the attorney's office, so I don't have anything to present at tonight's meeting. That's why I put it on as pending. So as soon as I receive that, I will get that to council and post it on a public meeting agenda so the public has access to it.
Okay, thanks. There are no boards, commissions, and committee reports listed. Do any of you have a report? None of them have met, I think.
No.
I know everybody's disappointed, but Cal Lake does not have a report.
We'll do council comments. Garn, you're first on my list.
Sure. I just want to say how great it looks downtown. I took a drive around with our intern from Isabel's to show her what all the different restaurants have set up. Coast looks great. Bodie's looks great. Uncommon Grounds got theirs in today. Everything's looking really nice down there. So I'm really pleased for them that they're able to do that. That's it.
Indeed. Holly?
Yeah, I just wanted to say that I look forward to discussing the Pride Flag resolution. I had hoped it would be on the workshop last week. I know we passed the Pride Month proclamation. We talked about it. Douglas passed their resolution to fly the flag, and they had a very successful public ceremony. And you know, we're just an open, tolerant, and welcoming community. That's why a lot of us choose to live here. And we've been a gay town for over 70 years. It's part of who we are. And I look forward to discussing it.
Indeed. I hope you realize that the objection was not necessarily having to do with flying the gay flag. It's that we've been reluctant over time to add items to the agenda that haven't been announced to the public so that the public didn't have an opportunity to come and comment on that. So anyway, we'll do it the right way and have it on the agenda next time.
Thank you.
Yes, Jane?
Oh, I just want to congratulate our fire department on their quick response. I think they saved a lot of property Saturday night. They were very quick to respond to the fire at Pumpernickel's. They did a fine job of containing the fire, and we're really lucky to have the firefighters that we have.
Indeed. I don't think I've seen as many emergency vehicles in one place ever, certainly not in Saugatuck.
I think there was about 10 fire engines and a whole lot more rescue trucks downtown. So yeah, we had a fine showing.
Yep. Chris?
I would like to also thank the fire department as well as the police department, the group that worked together on Saugatuck Douglas together, the merchants that are out with their various racks, as well as the restaurants. Today we broke free, so happy times.
Indeed. Barry,
No comment.
Mark?
Yeah, again, I'd like to echo thanks to the fire district and our first responders, police, et cetera, for their rapid response Saturday night. I also think it gives us pause to thoroughly think through when we start closing streets and limiting access to emergency vehicles. And so that's my comment. Thank you.
Thanks. Well, I have no further comments, so I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
A second?
Second, yeah. Go for it, Chris.
A little bit earlier. So moved and seconded that we adjourn. Any discussion? Then call the roll, please, Kirk.
For Plank,
Yes.
Peterson,
Yes.
Becken,
Yes.
Johnson,
Yes.
Leo,
Yes.
Lewis,
Yes.
Trester.
Yes,
Motion passes.
we are adjourned. Thank you very much. Good meeting.